Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daebak Podcast, where we do a deep dive into the classic Korean dramas that have won over generations of fans across decades and around the world. Hi folks, today we're discussing F4 Thailand Boys Over Flowers, the latest adaptation of Hana Yori Dango, the 1992 manga that has spawned a 30-year teen drama empire. I'm one of your hosts, Alisa, also known as the Bollywood Newbie on Twitter, and I'm joined by Melanie of Pardesi Reviews on YouTube.
Hello.
Vickey of That Vickey Girl, also on YouTube, but Vickey will be joining us a little later. And then finally, Catherine of TotallyFilmy.com.
Hi, everyone.
And today we have a special guest, RK, who goes by @ROH_tweets on Twitter. Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Very excited to have you here. She's a good friend of the podcast. So before we begin, I want to warn folks that this episode will contain massive spoilers for F4 Thailand and all of the related dramas such as Boys Over Flowers and Meteor Garden. So if you haven't seen it yet, please stop, go watch it, and then come back to the episode. I also have to give a content warning for this episode. We will be discussing bullying and sexual violence and assault as part of the plot of F4 Thailand and the other versions of this story. And I know it's kind of a heavy way to start things off, but I do want to be respectful given some of the themes we'll be discussing in this episode. So now I want to give a little background on this franchise and the special relationship our podcast has with this story. So F4 Thailand is the latest adaptation of Hana Yori Dango, the Japanese manga that began running in 1992 and was published for 11 years and 37 volumes. It's given birth to at least 14 official adaptations, including a radio drama, an anime film, a live-action Japanese film, and drama adaptations in Taiwan, Japan, Korea, China, and now Thailand. Almost a year ago, we recorded a podcast episode on Boys Over Flowers, which is the 2010 Korean adaptation of this story. But what I didn't realize at that time was what a monster this franchise is and what it would mean to our podcast, because that one episode accounts for half the total listens on the podcast, and it is literally the engine that drives all of our engagement. I'm boggled by this. I think my partners are probably even more boggled by this.
It's crazy.
It really is crazy. Catherine sometimes weeps to think about it. But anyway, yeah, this franchise is 30 years old, and yet it still has this power. And by the way, this week we hit 15,000 total listens on our podcast. Yay! Go
Yay.
us. Thank you to everyone who listens to us because we so appreciate you all. So the other thing about that Boys Over Flowers episode is in it, I mentioned that F4 Thailand teaser trailer had dropped and I was planning to watch the adaptation. But when I asked my podcast partners whether they planned to watch it, they were like, Alisa, you lunatic, you already made us watch 3 different versions of this story. We're not watching anymore. But here we are.
Here we are.
A year later.
And I'm watching multiple Thai dramas. So, there we go.
There we go.
I think at the time too, I said, oh, that trailer is interesting because it's dark and I'll give one episode a try and then probably won't go any further.
Right. But we're all still watching. We're 9 episodes in at this point and we're halfway through the drama. So yes, which is very interesting. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. So F4 Thailand tells the story of Goya, a poor but hardworking and feisty teenager who's a scholarship student at an exclusive school for the ultra-rich elite. The school is ruled by the F4 or the Flower Four, a group of incredibly wealthy and handsome young men whose leader, Tom, is a bully who is conducting a reign of terror. But Goya refuses to bow to Tom's will, and as a result, she wins his love. But many threats lurk to their happiness, including Tom's mother, who is determined to destroy their relationship. So this drama, and I'm going to list the stars, but I'm only going to use their nicknames because in Thailand, most people go by their nicknames professionally and their real names are super long and hard to pronounce. So I'm going to spare myself. So it stars Tu as Goya, who is the feisty female lead, Bright as Tom, who is the boy who's in love with her, Du as Ren, the artistic member of the F4, Win as Kawin, the playboy, and Nani as MJ, the mafia heir. And this is directed by Pata Tongpan. And we rarely mention the director on our podcast, which is actually a failing of ours. We probably should do that more often. But I really want to mention him for this episode because he is doing, in my opinion, a phenomenal job on this adaptation. And I really want to make sure he gets his due recognition. And we just got joined by Vickey. Yay!
Yay!
Hi, Vickey. I'm so glad. Yay. So we're just getting started. I just want to mention that the show is doing extremely well. It's the #1 show on VU, which is an Asian streaming service, and it's got 100 million plus views on YouTube for the total episode count, which is kind of unbelievable. So
yeah, I mean, the neat thing is that they are on paid streaming services in Asia, but it's interesting the model of these Thai shows that they're putting them for free on YouTube, and that gains them an international audience. I mean, it certainly reduces that barrier if you can just say it's free on YouTube. Here.
The other thing that's interesting is they have English subs on them right away. When they post it, it already has the subs, unlike Korean shows that don't. So I find that very interesting as well. Yeah, they're very conscious of an international audience. So we're going to dive into a discussion of the show, but first I kind of want to lay out where we all stood on the franchise before we started watching F4 Thailand. So Melanie and Vickey, I would say, think of Boys Over Flowers as a guilty pleasure that you can't help loving despite knowing better. Is that accurate?
It's crack.
To how you guys?
It's crack.
Yeah.
It's crack. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Catherine and RK hate Boys Over Flowers with a white hot passion and wanted to die in a fire. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
I'd say that's accurate.
Yeah, it's accurate. Okay. I am obsessed with this franchise against my will, and I have seen all the versions of it and the manga, and I'm very invested in this franchise. So that's kind of where we're all at. And before we decided to do this episode, I told everybody, you do not have to participate. You can opt out. I didn't want to force anybody to watch this against their will. But to my surprise, not only did everybody opt in, but we're all still watching and invested in the story. So I found that very interesting. So now I'm just going to turn it over to you guys. What do you guys think of the show?
And when you told me I had to watch it back in December, we were just amazed at the production values. I don't know what I expected from a Thai series, but the writing, the way that they were compressing the episodes, there's not as many episodes as the Korean version. So instead of feeling like there's a lot of time filler, you just feel like every episode has so much that happens in it. And I'm literally now to the point where I count down the hours. My husband laughs at me because it airs at 7:45 a.m. Chicago time. And I set an alarm and get up on a Saturday morning to watch it as soon as it comes on. That's how obsessed I am now. And in the beginning, when we were watching, there was only a couple of episodes out. And then Alisa's like, okay, well, let me tell you got to watch together, which is Bright and Win in a Boy Love. And so that, so then I binge that. And, so I'm watching, I've watched a few Thai series while F4 has been airing, but the quality of this production, the quality of the writing, the quality of the directing, all of the little tiny details that are in the show that we obsess over and analyze every week, it's mind-boggling to me. It's so good.
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vickey.
Hi, Vickey here. So I joined a bit late, but my thoughts on this is, well, considering this is the first remake of Boys Over Flowers that I've watched ever since the original, the Korean version of Boys Over Flowers, that says a lot because I was not into all the other remakes. So the Thai version is the one that's kind of won me over so far compared to all the other ones. And I'm into it. I may not be as into it as Alisa and Melanie. I'm into it. I'm into it in the way of how I'm into all my shows I watch. I think it's a great show. I really think there's a new dynamic to it that makes it different from the other remakes, and it's very attractive. I mean, the cast is attractive. This is like the best looking cast I've ever seen in my life, and this is also my first Thai drama, but it flows so easily. It works. The writing works, and also Alisa mentioned it being on YouTube with English subs already. It's really, really like good because it allows people from all corners of the earth to basically tune in, and it's like you already have the subs, you don't have to wait for it, it's there. And so I think I like the dynamic also of the characters. Goria in this one is a bit tolerable for me than Jandi was.
Yes, by far.
In the Voice of a Flower, their hair also is much better. But there's just so many pluses to this show that I feel like it's attracting audiences from all ages. The youths, us, we're all older, doing our thing. I think everybody's kind of into it in some way, one way or the other. So I'm here for a good time and I like it. Yeah.
So how about Catherine and Hema? Since you guys hated Boys Over Flowers, I would love to hear your thoughts, your general impressions of it.
So I actually watched the first episode before you guys did because someone on Twitter was doing a live watch the day it dropped. Oh, wow. And I was just watching it because it was dumb and I thought we could have some fun with it. And I was surprised at not just the production value, but at how dark that first episode was. And I thought, oh, they're telling a different kind of story. But honestly, without the hook of all of us watching it together to do this episode, I don't know that I would have watched episode 2. I will say that it's quite compelling, like on its own. Even if I didn't know if it was Boys Over Flowers, I might have wanted to watch it, even without that background. But that helped a lot because I knew what was coming as well. And I was interested in how it compared to the original, the Korean original, which of course I hated. So I'm happy to say I don't hate this quite as much. In fact, I don't hate it at all, even if I don't love it the way Alisa does. I think my view is that they're telling the story in a different kind of way that's more appropriate to the time we live in. And, the improved production values and the better fashion and all are just a function of that as well. But I do really appreciate the YouTube thing. And I noticed that it's not just English subs. There are subs in like 8 different languages. So you can, that's amazing. And I think it is a way for them to draw attention in the Western world. And then eventually GMMTV will end up with some kind of arrangement with Netflix or something, the way that Korean production houses have done. But this is a good way for them to get everybody on board.
Yeah. Oh, Catherine, we can't hear you. Sorry.
For me, that actually is kind of a draw, that idea of making Thai dramas more accessible. Not that I need another, tunnel to burrow in, but I do like some of what I've seen. However, it ends up hard to find them sort of on legitimate streaming services, and you know how my computer will blow up at the least thing. So that actually would be interesting for me. And I mean, for those of us who have watched some Thai dramas, we know that the production values are not of this level all the time. But the other side of it is if you get an international audience, if you can get, that Netflix money, then we'll see more good quality productions. But
Catherine, what do you think of the storytelling? Like, what do you think of?
Well, you know that the first episode I thought, what did I tweet? I never thought I would enjoy a version of this story, and I am hooked. Like, I am going to watch right to the end. And for me, it's not that I don't enjoy crack, because give me give me the last Empress, full on makjang crack, and I'm there for it. But with Boys Over Flowers, I couldn't get past all the problematic stuff that was left kind of hanging out there and not looked at with a serious eye. As RK points out, some of that's the time. But now I look at it and I think, how can you continue to watch this drama and find it interesting, compelling, attention grabbing with all of that problematic stuff? The Thai version gives us those storylines, those problematic issues, and it takes the time to unpack them and resolve them. And that is much more appealing for me.
Yeah, I mean, and so I'm laughing because he goes, I'm not as obsessed with it as Alisa, but and as everyone knows, I am really, really obsessed with this story. And I've been obsessed with it from every version, but almost against my will. Like I found it so compelling, but at the same time, I was like, God, this is so problematic. This woman's being hit and also sexually assaulted by the male lead. You know, she's being beaten up. She's there's so many problematic elements in the story, and yet I couldn't, and I didn't even, and the other thing is I didn't like the male lead in any of the versions except for Meteor Garden 2001. I hated Jun Pyo. I hated Dong Yu-ji. I thought he was a rat-faced sociopath. I and even Dao Min-si, who's the male lead in Meteor Garden, who was played by Jerry Yan in a very appealing way. He's so violent that even though I liked his portrayal, I couldn't root for the main ship. So, and yet I couldn't stop watching any of the stories. It was, I was just so drawn in because, as we said in the previous episode, I really think at heart, this story is about women grappling with the patriarchy. And it's about women who desire men, but men are an existential threat to women. I mean, women are most likely to be killed or assaulted by their intimate partner. That's just a fact, statistics. So how do you reconcile your desire with the fact that this person is potentially an existential threat with you? And I think that's what was drawing me into the story. When I first saw the teaser trailer for F4 Thailand, I got really excited because in my gut, I was like, these people understand the story they're telling and they're not afraid to go dark. And it's good because this is a dark story. And reflected in the fact, like, for example, that in this adaptation, every single time Tom and Goya have an intimate emotional moment where they draw closer, it's at night. And it's usually with one of them bleeding or sick, right? Every single time. It's so predictable. And I was like, wow, and that's a directorial choice. And they understand that this is a dark romance. They understand that there's a threat baked into the story that you really can't remove. And rather than
from episode 1, we see this, and that I was just so amazed at how this director and these writers have updated the story, and the addition of social media, and that when the red card happens, it's an explosion of texting and social media posts and people videoing and tormenting. And then the director chose the place where the bullying happens is an abandoned stadium. This is a new thing, at least to me. It's a new addition to the story that makes it look like a Roman Colosseum. And we see the entrance of F4 as if they are Roman emperors come in to sit and give their thumbs up or thumbs down. And it is amazing. And it just adds another layer of depth to the story and to the bullying. When I was watching the Korean version, my husband wasn't watching all of it with me, but when I watched, he saw some of the bullying scenes and he said, this is the most sadistic show I've ever seen. That was his reaction to the Korean version. And yet, like in the next episode, we're supposed to be like, oh, look at this puppy love and everything is, unicorns and hearts and whatever. And this show, we'll delve into it more, but they're really grappling with the issues. In the original version, the main female character is drugged and incriminating pictures are taken of her in a sexually suggested way. Well, here, the director chose that the female villain drugs our male hero. He passes out. She uses his thumbprint to open his phone and unleash more bullying on the heroine. So all of these choices add depth, update. I don't know. I just like each week I'm amazed because, as RK said, we know the bones of the story. And the fun part is that each week it's like, what new twist are they going to put on a familiar story that we already know? Because each time they surprise me and they add some new layer of depth to the story that I'm expecting to unfold.
Yeah, and that's actually what keeps me going. I'm not gonna lie. The fact that they switch it up, I love that because the original was something that I just want to watch once in my life. And it's not something that I want to rewatch again and again. And so I was really hoping that the Thai one would also switch it up a little, and they did. And so it gives a little bit of element of surprise in a way, and that to me as a viewer, I like that. I really like that. I feel like when you do a remake, you don't have to make it exactly like the original, because sometimes it just feels like you're watching the same things over and over again with different, people. But with the Thai version, I feel like sometimes it almost feels like I'm watching a different type of story almost, and I like that. I like that about that. So
I think it, and I think it is a different type of story.
Yeah.
I think that so what's remarkable to me is they have the plot. They can't do anything about the plot. The plot is what it is. They have to follow it, right? But within the lines of the plot, the way they're coloring it in is so different. It's so rich. There's so many layers going on of storytelling on every level. It's like the setting, the costuming, the cinematography, the sound design is incredible on this. And we'll get into, there's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start small because I think it's very telling. You have like two characters that are small characters. One is Tia, who is Tom's sister, and you have Glacau, who is Goya's brother. And these are small, pretty inconsequential characters in the original stories. Tia comes in, kicks her brother, says, "I love Goya," thumbs up, and then kind of exits. But in this version, Tia is in the story throughout, and she is afraid of her mother, despite being a competent businesswoman and a strong person in many ways. When she's talking to her mother, there is fear in her eyes. And it's a subtle change, but it adds so much depth to the story because you understand that the mother is a real threat, that she has done harm to her daughter. And her daughter is desperately trying to prevent the same harm being visited on her brother, but has not been able to stop it because her mother is just that powerful. So you have this tiny little character that a very small change to her characterization, and boom, you suddenly open up a whole new level of storytelling. And like with Glacau, he in other versions, there's a little brother and the male lead kind of showers gifts on him, and that's the end of it. But in this version, Tom spends a lot of time with Glacau doing things like tying his tie for school and cooking for him, and they bond. And then there's a scene, and this was in the last episode, where Goya and Tom are going to have a huge fight. And Goya says something that upsets Tom. And Tom gets up, takes Goya, and leaves the house with her because he doesn't want to fight in front of Glacau. Now that changes the whole dynamic of the fight, because it's not a fight that you would see in a teenage drama between a teen boy and girl. It's like a married couple. It's like a father and mother who don't want their child to be exposed to the fight. But the kid hears it anyway. And they spend a lot of time on Glacau's face reacting to the fight. And it's every kid who's ever had to hide in the bedroom and listen to their parents fighting. And then after they break up, it's weird because they were never really together, but they break up, like, because there's a crack up, right? And Glacau leaves to go be with his family, and he breaks down and cries and says, I'm trying not to think about him, but I can't help it. And it just gives so much emotional resonance to the fact that they have not just lost his sister's boyfriend, their family broke up. They created a family within the three of them, and it's gone now. And that's a huge loss. So the emotional stakes get raised just from a small change to a minor character that didn't amount to much in a previous version. And that's just like two examples of the storytelling throughout that has been going on through the whole drama. It's just incredibly impressive. I'm just blown away. I mean, I'm a writer, and just on the level of craft, like just to see how they're pulling it off has been unreal. Like for another example is like the in drama soap opera. They have a joke in drama of a soap opera called Flower Over Boy, and it's a parody of like really over the top Lahon dramas in Thailand. But what they're doing is a meta commentary, because they notice they do the drama whenever there's a plot point that they have to do because it's in the original manga, but like it's so ridiculous that they have to call it out. So like the fake kiss when not fake.
When
accidental
Gloria
kiss.
falls
Right.
on him. Yeah.
When she falls on him and they, accidentally kiss. And then the next episode, they open up with that Lahorn with a jokey version of that because they know it's ridiculous, right? So, and they know the audience knows it's ridiculous. So they're using that as kind of a meta commentary through the whole series.
Right.
And it's just
Right.
those kind of choices over and over and over again, but like because they're doing that constantly in every episode, it feels like every episode is super dense, like there's so much going on in every episode. And Mel, you've been part of these conversations. There's so many conversations online going on about,
I mean, that's one of my
dissecting it. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things about watching this drama is the fan interaction, is because, I mean, I've watched other dramas live week by week with other people, and that's very enjoyable. But this seems to be on another level because the writers and the director are putting in so many Easter eggs for us, for like, to the level of Tom's cat is named Dango, right?
Yeah.
Like, so they, they're calling back to the original manga by, and the villainous, the evil woman character, Hana. Again, that's part of Hana, the name of the original manga. So there's little Easter eggs to find, the details of the costuming, so the whole, you almost have to watch it first thing in the morning on Saturday because Twitter just explodes with everyone discussing, did you notice this? Did you notice that expression? Did you notice what Bright was, that he was wearing the animal print again? And we've all analyzed what it means when Bright is wearing an animal print means he's more in beast mode, or he's wearing a chain, a necklace, so he's under the control of his mother. Like there's costuming choices that are so thoughtful. And even to the level of when they have to have an episode to the zoo, and the director has discussed this online, which was really fun. But Gloria picks up a honey badger stuffed animal, which he buys for her. But then we all realize that it's a metaphor for Tom himself, that he's a honey badger. He doesn't give him, a rat's ass about anybody else. He doesn't care,
Well, and I want to get into that a little bit too, because that episode was actually pretty amazing. There's an arc. It starts out at the zoo. They have a date at the zoo, and then it continues into the next episode. But like the honey badger imagery, first of all, most of the people in the audience don't know what a honey badger is, and they never explain it in the context of the drama. Yep. You have to just figure it out. And people did figure it out, eventually. And then Goya grabs it, and it looks like a cute stuffed animal, but it's the most dangerous animal on earth. It can take down hyenas and lions. Right. So, and she's being kind of cavalier in how she's handling this animal, and it's the metaphor for the fact that she doesn't fully understand the threat that she's engaging with by engaging with Tom, right? And so she's being too thoughtless about it. And then they have a scene after the zoo date where she's angry with him and she starts punching the honey badger, and then there's an open safety pin and it stabs her in the hand and she bleeds. Yeah. And when
it's so fairy tale,
it is. It's totally fairy tale, like bleeding, pricking yourself, blood, coming of age, menstruation. It's all these symbolisms and imagery, but it's also like a threat and a warning to her. Don't punch this person thoughtlessly. This person is actually dangerous. This person, you don't understand the threat you're engaging with. And she's wearing colors that match the honey badger. She's wearing a red and black shirt, and the honey badger is black with a red kerchief. And it's kind of demonstrating her alignment with the animal side of Tom, but also that she kind of has an animal inside herself as well that's compelled by his animalistic side. So like,
this is just one example of the level of analysis that we can have over one episode. And we do this every week.
Yeah. So are you guys, so I'm just curious, because like Melanie and I are like totally immersed in this on Twitter, but how about the rest of you? Are you picking up on this as well? Or what is your experience of this?
I notice things. I don't follow the threads on Twitter that you guys are following, so I don't necessarily see it ahead of time. I am very fond of this level of sort of critical analysis of drama, and I do it personally for everything that I watch. Like I have a notes folder on my computer for every drama I watch. But I think what I'm enjoying particularly about the commentary here is that it's clearly people who have seen other versions of the franchise and want to see the differences that this show is coming up with, but also they want to analyze it in context, right? Like, so it's not just what this drama is doing, it's also what this drama does better than than other versions of the franchise that already exist. And to me, that's the most interesting thing, because I don't know that I would have watched this if it wasn't part of the franchise. And I don't know how many other people would be either. So I think that's the hook. But with that hook, they've done such a good job of updating it and being so incredibly self-aware. Like Melanie brought up the social media issue, but the thing is, the bullying that happens on social media literally lasts forever. Like, people can find your tweets that you tweet today 15 years from now and tank your job or, you know, kill your political campaign or whatever, right? So the fact that you can bully someone and it can last forever and stay with them their whole life elevates schoolyard bullying to something really dangerous and very present. And I think that is very compelling for anyone who's watching the show right now. And obviously it's something they couldn't do back in 2009, but I do think that update was necessary. And there's a framework for discussing violence against women and sexual harassment and all of that now because of Me Too. And again, the show had to be sort of self-aware about that. But what I find so interesting about all the analysis is the extreme focus on a single scene. And I think it's great because obviously the writer put that much thought into it, and to have the fans respond to that must be so gratifying for that whole team, for the cast, the crew, everyone involved with the production. I love that kind of stuff. And we don't get to do it with K-drama because they're sort of one-offs. There's one season. It's not a franchise. You've talked about one drama, you're sort of done and you have to move on to the next one. But here there's so many different versions, and I think that broad appeal is really nice.
Yeah, I agree, RK. I definitely think that it being a part of a franchise and watching it, trying to kind of tear it apart and see what they're doing differently, what they're doing similarly, Easter eggs, all that really, really adds to the appeal. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm not following the threads as much as well, but I do understand why, and I do read a few of them, and it's really interesting. I mean, the things that people are able to connect, I'm like, whoa, I didn't even think of this. But that's what makes drama watching fun sometimes, like you mentioned. You don't see with some K-dramas. We just watch it and then we just move on to the next. But you see with this one every week, Saturday, Sunday. Well, okay, Saturday. But even Sunday still on my feed, there's still people breaking it apart. And so, yeah, Alisa is like,
oh no, I mean, I was just going to say that I think, you know, it's been really interesting too, because the director actually is responsive to, I got to call myself out, guys. Sorry. The director liked a bunch of my tweets. I was like, oh my God. I was very excited. It's really cool.
Well deserved.
Thank you. And it was connected to the last episode where I was analyzing the funeral scene in the last episode. And I think, you know, the engagement, I guess the point is that the director puts that stuff in there deliberately, and it's very thought out. None of this is done cavalierly. Like, all the choices in the drama are so precise and intentional. Like, you don't have to agree with all of them, but I think it's all, you know, that they really like. So for example, the zoo thing, again, the director talked about it and he said, we knew there was going to be a date at the zoo, but why is it set at the zoo? And it wasn't good enough for us to go, well, that because it was in the previous adaptations. Instead, it was like, we have to have a narrative reason for it to be in the zoo. And the reason why is because Tom is an animal. He's a beast. And like, it's talking about the fact that he is in that animalistic state. That's why it's set there. And even though the zoo date is sort of lighthearted, do you notice that he's wearing a shirt that's half animal print and half not? And so he looks really cute and funny, but that animal print is still there. The threat is still there. The honey badger is a cute stuffy, but it's still dangerous. You can still bleed from it. You know, like there's all, and it's all intentional. And it's so cool to like pick it up, but also that the director goes, yes, that's what I meant to do with that. And then you go, yay, you know, like I picked up what they were trying to throw down there.
Right. I mean, he said that they couldn't even, the honey badger doesn't exist in zoos in Thailand. Those stuffed animals aren't readily available. So he put the props department or whatever on, you know, on a journey to find that. but the fact that the level of that detail is what I really admire about this series, and the care with the costuming. So we've looked up that there's a whole thread of someone that analyzes what Bright is wearing in the episodes and what, fashion house they're from, and to find these, I mean, they're Prada shirts. I'd never seen anything like it before, but it's half animal print, half, he wears two of them in two different episodes, and one is bananas. I mean, so they're sort of like wild Hawaiian shirts, but again, it's having that leopard motif in his clothing that it reappears over and over again, and now we're clued into what it means if he's wearing that heavy chain necklace, which I'm assuming is also some expensive thing, but that they've gotten clothing of a very high level. It's not so campy as some of the other versions, but yet it's all with meaning. And there's color palettes that have meaning, to the point of
right.
Goria's plaid school uniform, when other members of F4 can be wearing similar colors, or they can be wearing plaids that show that they're on her side, that they're with her.
Yeah, like when Gawin helps Connie get revenge on her crappy boyfriend named Tesla. He's wearing a sweater that has a teddy bear on it. She's sending bear emojis to her boyfriend, and then he buys her a really expensive teddy bear purse from Alexander Wang, I guess it is. So it's a designer, but like they picked the thing that ties into the theme and shows them aligned with each other. And it's just a little, I mean, it's not a huge part of the narrative, but it's just this attention to detail that's incredible. And let's talk about the characters, because the characters are different, really different in some cases from their origin characters. Like, let's start with Tom, is the obvious one. What do you guys think of him?
He's not as ridiculous as Junpyo is. I mean, I take that back. He can be ridiculous. And in a way, the writers kind of lulled us. And then he got so sweet, like his reaction to the accidental kiss was so extreme. And then his reactions at the zoo, where he's covered with birds and whatever, really trying to be tame. And then we kind of were lulled. And then when he exploded in episode 7, I was really taken aback. Like, he's really showing a range and a darkness that I don't know that we completely saw past the beginning episodes and some of the other versions. I don't know if other people think differently.
Yeah, I was gonna say that to me, Tom definitely seems more, not angrier, but I feel like he's definitely more complex than I think Junpyo was, because especially that episode that Mel just brought up with him blowing up. Junpyo was many things, but I don't think that he was like that explosive in that extent in the show. So that's a very stark difference that I've noticed about the two male leads, that their personalities, though it's ridiculous and they're both whatever, I feel like Tom is more of a extreme-ish a little bit when it comes to the anger issues. He can blow up. And I don't think I saw that with Junpyo. So yeah,
I think it's clear that he's written to be just a little bit more dangerous than Junpyo, not just from the perspective of the violence, but even at the beginning when he's trying to get back at Goya, he's not doing the thing Junpyo did where he's like, oh, she's in love with me and she's just not telling me. He was actually angry, like he wanted answers. It wasn't just this idea of, oh, let me explore this whole puppy love thing that this girl obviously has for me. And I thought that was an important aspect of his character, because it shows that his primary motivation at the very beginning was sort of revenge and anger. And it was only seeing Goya in a new light that helped him sort of not change exactly, but show a different side of his personality. And I'm also really curious about how and when he'll push back against his mother, because that dynamic is similar to the Korean version, but she is much more dangerous, in my opinion, than her Korean version was. So I'm really curious about where this is going, but I think Tom is a better written character than Junpyo. And honestly, he's just less camp and ridiculous. And I don't think the writers treat him kind of like a dummy. Like Junpyo was treated kind of like he was a dummy, right? And I feel like the writers at least acknowledge that Tom is clever in his own way, even if he's not quite as clever as some of the rest of the F4. So
yeah, there's range with Tom. How about that? There's range. He has room to grow. I feel like there's more details in his personality than we got with Junpyo. Yeah.
What do you think, Catherine? Oh, Catherine, you're muted again.
Sorry.
No worries.
I was just thinking about Jerry Yan and how we had mentioned that was the first version of that character where we saw some kind of vulnerability with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're saying the same things now. We're seeing that extremely dangerous part of his character, but we're also seeing moments of vulnerability. And it's really nice to see those two things playing off in this character. But I mean, you know, I've said my theory is the Boys Over Flowers Korean version was meant to be a live action manga. And that's why it was, you know, crazy and cracktastic. And it didn't work because they didn't grasp how to make that happen. And everything just ended up like the family ends up being a clown show.
Right.
And that's another thing in F4 Thailand that I really appreciate, that her family are not, you know, clowns. Honest, I'm sorry, I don't have another word for it.
No.
But there's more depth to them. They are more interesting. They're more supportive. I just in terms of characters, that has struck me.
I wanted to finish up on Tom first before we go to other people. But like for me, first of all, I hated the male lead in most of the other versions, and even Jerry Yan, who I didn't hate, I couldn't ship him with the female lead in good conscience. He was too dangerous, right? But with Tom, I love Tom. And I'm invested in his journey as an individual, not just as part of the ship, because it feels like he's in a battle for his own humanity. His mother and the system that he lives in is dehumanized him. And he is struggling so hard to become a better person. And you see the struggle, even when he screws up, even when he goes wrong. And it makes him deeply sympathetic to me. I'm like really like on his side. I'm thinking about just it almost feels like a Pinocchio story. He wants to be a real boy, you know. And he's just lovable in a way that wasn't true for me for the other versions of him. So I really absolutely love how he's been written. And I do appreciate that they went dark with him, because I think it was a shock to himself as well. We'll get more into that scene later, but I think he's kind of appalled with himself and understands that he's got to stop this or something really bad's going to happen, and he doesn't want that bad thing to happen.
Well, he has a
conscience.
He talks about that. An added thing that the writers did was when they kind of truncated the whole villainous Hana storyline, which, you know, was multiple episodes in the Korean version, and it felt like it was over in one episode with this one. But he has a conversation with her after she's drugged him. Again, I love that they added that detail, but she gives him this old monologue on why she hates herself and all the things that she did to try to win his love. And then he says to her, I hate myself sometimes too, you know, and I hate the things that I do. And it was just, it was just another level of self-awareness and trying to grow. And he was seeing her as like a mirror of him, like, you know, of himself, of someone that was doing the bullying and trapped, you know, in her family's expectations and all of that. And so it was just, I was just amazed. That whole episode, I was just amazed at all the choices that the writers made. And if someone was really had this darkness in them, it makes sense that they would backslide, especially with, I mean, we all knew what was going to happen. In other versions, it's a kiss that we see with the second male lead. Here, it's just, a hug. But I mean, we just saw that, like, if lasers could have come out of Tom's eyes, like, Ren would have been toast. And he explodes. That whole episode was so shocking. But you could see it was just kind of like he hit rock bottom, with himself, and how he was hating himself in that scene. That's another thing. I rewatch episodes, and I don't do that for any other drama, but I usually rewatch each episode twice during the week, getting ready to watch the next episode. And that was one definitely was hard to watch, but there was so much there to unpack of what they were trying to say about someone who had all this violence in them and was trying to grow from it, that it was really impactful. And
even from the very first episode, though, he has more self-awareness, because like when they're beating up that first person in the stadium, and it's brutal. It's such a, in other versions, they have a glamour entrance. And in this one, the entrance is terrifying. When they come in, Tom is wearing animal prints, and you can hear their footsteps, and the stadium is really decrepit. And this kid is already like beaten up with, bleeding, and it's really rough. And anyway, the kid is like trying to rally everybody and be like, we can fight the F4. And he's like, you don't get it. Like, I don't order these people to bully you. They want to do this because it's a release valve for them. I'm giving them anonymous accounts in real life. So first of all, holy crap, the commentary on bullying, right? And the dynamic of bullying and why it happens was amazing. But also he's just already out of the gate more self-aware of understanding, and he's part of this bigger ecosystem. And to a certain extent, he doesn't have a lot of autonomy in that system. He's got a role to play, and it's a role that he's trapped by. Even though he feels like he has to play it to win his mother's respect. So it's just this whole difference in the character right off the bat, like none of the other characters had that level of self-awareness about why they were doing the things that they were doing. So I think you automatically establish that this is a person who's capable of growth, because they've already coming in with a better understanding of why they're doing this stuff in the first place. So yeah, I just love the character. I'm just, like I said, I'm so invested in his journey. I'm so rooting for him. I just feel like I really want him to succeed. I really want him to be a better person. Apart from anything to do with Goya. So yeah, speaking of Goya, let's talk about Goya. Let's talk about her.
She's the most awesome version of this heroine of any of the versions. She is awesome. I mean, just from the beginning. Just the scene, I mean, we knew it was coming, but the scene when she kicks him and knocks him down, oh my God, it was just, it was this epic. It was absolutely epic. And they've added shades to her character as well, in that I feel like we're seeing how she has some violence within her. And so you see how, the second male lead, Ren, is not the best choice for her, which in so many other versions, it feels like, girl, wake up, look what's in front of you, this nice boy. But in this episode, in this version, I love how they really show that Gloria and Tom are really the matched pair, and that while they've made the Ren character, the second male lead, have much more depth and be a much more interesting character. He's not like a flat Ken doll, like in the Korean versions. No violin playing in the snow in this version, but while she has a choice, you can just see that she's making the right choice for her in choosing Tom.
Yeah, Goya to me. Oh, so go ahead.
I was just going to ask, because I know how much Catherine hates John D. I was just wondering. I wanted to hear what Catherine has to say about Gloria.
I love Gloria. I really love her. Again, she's not a caricature. And as you've already mentioned, there's depth to her. There's a darkness to her character as well. I have a lot of faith in the director, the writers of this production, that they aren't going to let us down at the end of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love her. I love her a lot.
I like that she's complex. I mean, because even like Makino in Hana Yori Dango, she's sort of like, she's spunky, and she's always fighting and she's always peppy and it's cartoonish. But Goya, she suffers and she's down and she's not always brave. She's not always doing the right thing. She makes mistakes. She lies to Tom when she shouldn't have, you know, like she feels very real. She feels very much like a teenage girl making the kind of mistakes that a teenage girl would make.
Yeah.
But she's also awesome. Like, oh my God. So like there's an episode, was it the last? No, it was episode 8 where she's with Tom and he wants her to be with her when he turns 18. And she counts, oh my God, that scene. And she counts down his birthday and he has his eyes closed. And then right at midnight, and he opens his eyes and he sees her face and the camera lingers on her face. And all you hear is his breathing. And he stops breathing for a moment and then he starts breathing again. And she looks so lovable in that moment. I cried. It's the only time I've cried because she just looks like, of course he loves her. Look at her. She's amazing. Like, why wouldn't he love her, you know?
Well, I love how the writers have explained Tom's feelings because, and again, going back to that confrontation with Hana, and she's like, why can't you love me? Why do you love Goria? Why can't you love me instead? And he just explains, Goria is Goria. Like, you know, she's the person that he loves, that he, you know, is just drawn to. And I just love that line. And, you know, and it just, I feel like they echo back to it and a lot of different other scenes where it's just, he only has eyes for her. And I just love the way.
Yeah. I mean, she's just amazing, you know, like, and I think that, so it's interesting too, because like the last episode, the episode title was The Incident of 1%. And it's a really complicated episode. And I want to dive into it in more detail in a bit. But I think when they say the 1%, you of course think of the financial 1%, which represents the F4 and their families and the ruling people of Thailand. But Goya is also the 1%. She's in the room at the funeral because she got there through her courage and resilience and integrity. And so she's also the 1%. And I think that the drama definitely wants you to see her that way, as being somebody like she's the shooting star. She's the meteor. She's the one who is going to disrupt everybody's lives. And through her, just her sheer force of who she is as a person is going to transform everybody.
And she can also stand toe to toe with
Tom.
With Tom's mother, you know, not only with Tom, but with Tom's mother.
Right.
I see Arcade nodding along to this.
Yeah. Go ahead, RK.
One of the things that I really like about this version over the Korean version is that unlike Jandi, who has, you know, all of the spine of a wet noodle, not only does Goria stand up for herself, but I think the writers have very consciously centered the story around her. Boys Over Flowers is very much the Go Jin-pyo show, right? Like it's about him and it's about his journey and his change, and she's just sort of along for the ride. But here it's very much her story. In addition to his story. And in fact, I'd say it's actually her story more than it's his story, because it's about, you know, she works hard to get into this school and she's like, this is part of her journey. She wants to be somebody. And all of this stuff with Tom just sort of happens. She doesn't will it to happen, but she doesn't just let it happen to her either, right? Like she's there every step of the way. She's making conscious decisions. So in this last episode, when she tells him she just can't anymore, it's partly her realization that his world is complicated and confusing for her, and she doesn't want to deal with all of that. Whereas in most shows where there's this sort of Cinderella theme, I think the assumption is that money glosses over all problems, and therefore the poor average girl can just slide into the rich world and fit right in. But, you know, this is the first time I've seen that acknowledged, that this is a difficult transition, that this is a world that you cannot navigate unless you were born to it. And I thought that was really, really well done, and also made me appreciate Goria as a character even more than I did before. And I already am 100% all in as far as she's concerned. Like, I actually want the show to end on a different note where she just goes off by herself and becomes awesome and doesn't need a man. You know, I get that's not going to happen, but that's what I would like to see.
I have a feeling she'll be awesome and she'll get the man.
Yes.
Fair enough.
You know, it's interesting too, because like we talked about this in the back channel. I really identify with Goya a lot, and I had you know, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I had a scholarship to go to an Ivy League school. I was 16 years old. I went off to school by myself, no support from my family because they had no clue as to what I was experiencing and had no ability to help me navigate what I was entering into. And I go to this school and I'm meeting all these wealthy people. And I didn't understand any of the rules. I didn't understand what was going on. And it was hard. It was really, really, really difficult. And I went through some crap with people, and learning the rules. And so to me, her struggle feels so real. It's like I'm emotionally very so caught up in her because I'm like, yeah, I know what it's like when at the funeral, when she's in the room and she's like, I have no idea what's going on here. I've been in rooms with people who are literal billionaires. I've dated, not anymore. I'm married a long time now, but I was dating men who had a lot of money or came from families with money. It's really freaking different. And you just don't know how to deal with all that. So yeah, like the writing feels very, even though it's cartoonish, obviously there's stuff goes on in this story that is not realistic, but some of it is realistic and it's emotionally realistic. Like her confusion in that scene of just being baffled and not knowing what's going on, it was very real. Like, I know this is important, but I cannot figure out how to deal with it. And her struggle is to own her own worth. Like her struggle is to recognize how amazing she is and to own her power and to fully come into her own and to step up and say, I do belong in that room. I do belong in that world. I'm going to make a place for myself in it through the sheer force of my own will. And that it's compelling. I love her.
Well, I love the two main characters and I love what the writers and the director have done with these archetypes. I think to me, what really shines in their writing is how they have fleshed out the other members of F4. Ren's character, the second male lead, has so much more depth than any of the other versions. And MJ, I don't even remember the Korean fourth member of that's how
Lubin. This version has actual speaking lines that are useful.
Right.
So.
Instead of just being there to kind of laugh in the background, he MJ is like the Greek chorus saying, that would be illegal. You kidnapped her. He's constantly commenting to Tom and saying, why are you doing that? And trying to keep the F4 together when they're breaking apart. He has an active role to play. He acts. I mean, at the end of episode 9, which if we didn't say it at the beginning, that's how far the series has gone when we're recording this, up to episode 9. And they had an extra KFC commercial at the end where evidently we're going to get a little bit of an MJ heartbreak backstory, which I'm all about it because we all love Nani. We love MJ.
We love Nani, but that's a little much.
I know, but anyway, at Cohen, that was the Kim Bum character in the Korean version. And while it was enjoyable, I don't know, I just feel like there's added depth and care to their backstories, and also just the way that they're interacting instead of just being in the room watching Gloria and Tom, fight or whatever it is. They're active participants in each episode, and they have things to do, and I don't know. I just really am enjoying the whole, all of the supporting characters and not just the two male leads, and appreciating the writing depth and attention paid to all of them.
Is this where we bring up Flower Shop Uncle?
Yes.
Sure. Flower Shop Uncle is awesome. We know now that he's apparently a well-known actor in Thailand. And I think that's very great casting because he kind of is the voice of wisdom often to the girls. Like he'll say things to the girls that are, and it gives if he's well known in Thailand, it means that his words have more weight.
I think he has a couple of talk shows. So that's the other thing that I love about this fan interaction is that there are some people that are familiar with the Thai media landscape that are tweeting about the show and letting us know details like that. That his background, and as Alisa said, it adds weight to him being that voice of wisdom. Gloria, that's Tom's problem. It's not your fault that whatever it is that happened. Or aren't, did this really happen with this F4 guys? Is this, is this? So just, I love him. I love all his interactions with the two girls. And, again, instead of it being a porridge shop or whatever it was in the Korean version, it's a flower shop. Like, again, just like lean into the voiceover flowers.
Yep.
I adore it.
Isn't it called Meteor Garden, the flower shop?
It's Meteor Garden, so Meteor it's kind Garden. Of
a play on it.
Yeah, it's a play on Meteor Garden. But like, I want to talk about Ren a little bit more because I think what they've done with him is remarkable. Because you're right, in previous versions, he's sort of like very bland. Wallpaper, very bland, like vanilla pudding. And I mean, he's a better alternative than the male lead, because he is not beating on the female lead, right, and abusing her, like, wow, low bar. But in this version, he is really complicated and kind of shady and does things in a roundabout way. He's not a straightforward person. And his character journey has been really interesting because he starts out being very selfish, very self-absorbed. And the only reason he helps Gorya is because she's interesting, I guess. He finds her interesting. But then he has this heartbreak with Mira, the love of his life, and because basically Gorya goads him into going after her and seeing for himself, unfortunately, that this isn't ever going to work out. Love is not enough, which is a really significant line. I discovered that love is not enough. And because he's been heartbroken before everybody else, he ends up being a step ahead of the rest of them in his character development. And he starts to become the person who's also, along with Gorya, kind of ushering everybody along the path to adulthood. And so,
I mean, the scene, the way that he tells the story of his breakup to Mira, to Gorya, it was epic because in this version, he's not a musician. He's an artist. He's constantly sketching people. And he always is carrying a sketchbook. And he showed that the pages of his sketchbook flip as he's telling the story. And we see all his drawings of Mira, that she becomes smaller and further away on each page. And it's an incredible sequence and just a way of storytelling. I mean, just mad respect for the way that they did that whole sequence.
Yeah, I was reading that it was actually hard to do because they had to make sure the pages blew without tearing. I mean, they had to put a lot of effort into that scene, and they didn't have to tell the story that way. That's just like another example of like the level of care that they've taken, and also the fact that Dude did it. He's a first-time actor, and when the series first started, I thought of him as the weak link of the cast. Because I didn't think he was that great. But in that scene, he stepped up. And you can tell that they worked with him to get him there, that the director like really coached him, and it shows. And, there's behind the scenes showing them coaching the actors, because a lot of them are brand new. Like Nani, and Du are all completely new. And the performances are great.
Yeah, they did workshopping on the character personalities with the young actors, and they really worked with them, and it's paying off. It's paying off because this is not a rush production. I mean, as you said, we saw the first trailer a year ago, and they've really put in a lot of work in pre-production and taken their time making this drama, and it shows.
Yeah.
Vicky, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. What do you think about Ren's character compared to the other versions?
More personality.
Yeah. It's a very low bar. It's a very low bar,
but more. And I like Ren. I think he's such a cutie. The actor, actually, in general. Like that scene in the yacht, I can't even say it right. But was it episode 7? No, 6. When they were on the yacht. 6. He looks really good. And as Alisa said, I can tell the difference. From the beginning, he was you can tell he was new, but that episode, he really stepped up. I thought that was when I saw his potential as an actor, I'm not gonna lie. And I like him. I don't know, but as far as second lead syndrome, I'm not
no.
No.
I'm not
No.
there. I don't think this allows you to even have second lead syndrome, because it's just, even Gora is not even so enthralled with him anymore. Like, it's dead and gone, you know what I mean? So you don't really we never got to grasp whatever she had for him. I feel like now you just focus on her own, self-identity and time and everything else, but he's just doing his thing, and I like that. I think he's cool. He's a cool character.
I think that they really made it clear, she had a choice to be with him. It was really obvious, and they very made it clear that it was, she did not want him. She wants Tom, and that it made more sense for her to be with Tom.
Yeah, because that scene where they had that opportunity to kiss and she was thinking about time, that was when I felt like that was the most Clara thing they could do, because the day before, her seeing Tom blow up, you would think that, oh my gosh, that would make her obviously not want time anymore. But the fact that she's on this perfect date with this sunshine of a character, and all she can think about is time, was when I knew that, okay, they've no going back.
So you don't get second lead syndrome, but what I love about how they're developing his character is he's sort of her guardian angel in a lot of ways, and he's really looking out for both of them. Like, he's really good friends for both of them, and he knows Tom so well that whole scene in the stadium when they have the big brawl, he provokes him because he knows that's the only way to get through to him, and it's like really well done, and he wants to punch him for various reasons because he deserves punching. But like, it's just, it was, because that fight scene is in Hana Yori Dango. And I think in Boys Over Flowers, I don't remember it in Boy, but I think that scene is in every, but again, it's a scene that's in every version, but the way it plays out in this version is so different.
I think it was the ice skate, when they were in the ice.
Yes, that's it. When they were ice
in Boys Over
hockey.
Hockey. That's
right. Yeah. That's right. So I want to let's talk about Gawin real quick, because we haven't talked about him too much, but he's such an interesting character. He's so different from, like you said, the Yi Young, who's the pottery boy. And I see Catherine nodding her head too, with pottery boy. Do you want to say something about it, Catherine? I see you nodding your head.
The character, Kim Bum's character in Boys Over Flowers, was just so one-dimensional and uninteresting, quite frankly. Let's make him a womanizer who makes pottery and is very full of himself. But this character is much, again, all of them, much more interesting. I'm sorry, Catherine, go ahead. No, go ahead. Oh, just the thing about Gawin is, like, he's the member of the F4 in a way that I find the scariest, because he is extremely aware of his own power and privilege and willing to weaponize it. And he is also the person who wants to protect their power and privilege the most. Yep. And so he smiles, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. He's very smooth, but underneath it, he will shiv you. And you really see that in the scene where he thinks Kaning is the weak link. And so he goes after her because he can't attack Goya directly. This is when he's trying to break up Goya and Tom. And so he thinks, well, she's this tiny, poor little girl. I'm just going to whisk her away and dazzle her, and then I'll intimidate her into doing what I want. And of course, Kaning turns out to be a total badass and doesn't allow it. But the fact that he was even willing to do that, like when he says to her that dessert costs 4,000 baht, peasant. He didn't say peasant, but that's kind of how it came across.
Yeah.
And just how manipulative he can be.
And yet I do like him.
Yeah.
I like bits of him. Like in the last episode with the funeral, he's the one, right, who arranges for the flower shop to do the flowers for the funeral. And he has this moment of explaining to Goria and Kaning about how important and influential this can be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he has this sort of coldly pragmatic view of the world around him. Like, it's not good people and bad people. It's people who get it and people who don't. And he wants to help Kaning and Goya be people who get it, right? I think that's how he sees it. And for me, of all the cast other than two, he's been the best of the F4. I think he's put in, Win has put in the most compelling performance. I love Kawin as a character. He's much more interesting than Kim Bom's character was in Boys Over Flowers. And I really like this aspect of a personality who understands what his power is. And he's like, I am totally okay with inhabiting this role. I can go to clubs and hang out with hostesses, and I can also use them to get information I need, right? Like, he's very transactional, and I just happen to like transactional assholes, I guess. So I'm really into that character.
I love it.
Along with many other transactional asshole characters.
But here's the thing, he's not a total asshole. And when it was episode 9 is really where it came out, because first of all, he is very pragmatic. And that's why the fact that he invited Haning and Goya into that room, he would not have done it if he did not think they were capable of learning and understanding what they needed to do there. Because he's not going to expose himself to people who don't get it, right? So in his estimate, it was actually a huge compliment to Goya and Haning, but they didn't understand it. They didn't understand just how much trust Gawain put in them in that moment. And he also paid them the respect of explaining to them what was going on. And Tom did not. That's why he had to lose Goya at the end of that episode, because rather than inviting her to be a true partner for him in that moment, he was like, no, I'm going to be paternalistic and protective and leave you out of the loop. And you're just going to have to trust me that I'm handling it, which is bullshit. And also Goya would never accept it. So but Gawain got it. Like, he understood, no, we have to actually mentor these people, and they are capable of learning. So his role in that episode was super interesting to me. And so that's why I don't think if he was a terrible person, he wouldn't have done that. But he is pragmatic, like you said. He's just very transactional. He understands the levers of power.
And I loved the way he finessed and rescued Kaning when she saw Tesla, her evil ex, and that was just an epic, I mean, that one-up thing happened in the other versions, but I love this one so much more. I just love that old.
Well, he was so much hot more in that scene, hot. And I am not like a Win fangirl, but man, he just, boy, oh boy, I was working for me when he's like, yeah, ring up with the credit card. I was like, yeah, baby, let's do it. I love you in this moment. And I'm not also, materialistic.
Tesla just really needed a comeuppance, right?
Oh, like, my God,
yes. Is world's worst boyfriend, like.
Yeah, no, and and I'm looking forward to the deepening relationship with Kaning and Cohen, and that best friend character is much more ditzy and bland in the Korean version, and I love the little spunk that I think the actress's name is Prem. I love her, what she's bringing to the role as well as Kaning. She's, she has a little spunk and moxie to her as well, which is why she's best friends with Goria. Like, it just, I love her interactions with Kaning, and we got a little tweet from her fan club posted in the last scene in episode 9. She had some yogurt on her nose in the scene with Cohen, and then he, wipes it off her nose, and they're like, oh, she's so shy. And the actress tweeted out, who's shy? Sort of implying like maybe she did it on purpose to get him to touch her face again. And I just, I love that. So, can't wait for more.
Her big epic moment was when, again, Gawain was trying to intimidate her in his house, and he gives her this really expensive dessert, and is like, tell your girl to back off, and she asked for his phone number, and at first they think, oh, she's going to be like all the other girls that are trying to get together with him, and then she uses it to send him the 4,000 baht for the dessert, which I looked up. It's $125 USD. So it's for somebody like her. She also
has no money in the bank afterwards, so it was a real power move on her part. But
she's like, oh, I didn't think it through,
but it was epic.
How amazing she was in that moment. So all the women are strong, by the way. Have you noticed? All of them are really badass. Mira, Tia, Lita, the fiance who just got introduced. I really appreciate the strength of the women in this version.
It's really interesting that she wears the same color combinations or color palette as Goya does, Lita. So that setup of the kind of compare and contrast between the two women that are intended for Tom is really fun to me.
Well, yeah, there people were pointing out it was the same outfit except that Lita had a Prada bag on, and that was the difference. And and it just, so there's so much good. This plays out in other versions, but like she is a perfectly appropriate choice for him. And in fact, in Boys Over Flowers, I wanted them to be together. I wanted her to stay with Junpyo. It was so obvious Junpyo should have picked her. Like, it was so obvious that was the right person for him. So that was a fail on the production's part, because, what they're accomplishing with F4 Thailand is like, she's not Goya. I mean, she's great. She's perfectly acceptable. His mother was really smart to pick someone like her because she is his type. And he probably could be reasonably happy with someone like her, but she's not Goya, and his heart, he's given his heart, and he's going to choose the less easy person to be with. So yeah, it's interesting how I'm really looking forward to the next episode. There's going to be a lot going on in the next episode about how all that plays out.
Well, and in Boys Over Flowers, I mean, you mentioned, like, I wanted the two of them to be together so much because I hated Jundi so much. And in this version, as you pointed out, the two young women are very, very similar. So in my head, I'm going, they're both appropriate. This is an interesting dynamic that has been set up, where I'm a little invested in both of them at this point. Whereas in Boys Over Flowers, it was like, no, just let's get Jundi out of the way, please.
Well, and something that was really interesting to me is like when she jumps on his back and bites his ear, he gets turned on. And I thought, well, that's super interesting, because the production is telling you not only is she really cool, they probably have good sex even on top of everything, right? And yet, I mean, Goya and him will have good sex too, but I mean, like the implication is that, sorry guys. Well, okay, so actually that's a good segue for me. I wanted to talk a little bit about this, because in the manga, there is a lot of sex. A lot of sex. First of all, the F4 all have a lot of sex. There are classmates who are having literal orgies that are portrayed in the manga. I'm not making this up. And they have scenes where the male lead and the female lead are topless, rolling around in bed together, teenage, what would be typical teenage behavior. And he almost sexually assaults her. That's a whole other thing that happens in the manga as well. Vicky's like giving me these crazy faces right now. She's in shock. So like the film versions have really sublimated the sexual subtext of the story because it's teenagers. I get it. You can't really like show that with teens in a filmed adaptation. But what do you think about the whole thing of sex in the story? Like, does it exist in the story between Tom and Goya? And how does that play out? I don't mean literal P and B sex. I'm talking about, like sexual energy, tension, desire, things like that. I mean, does it? Do you think it's there?
I'm going to say something completely inappropriate, but I think part of the problem, or not problem, but part of the thing I've observed in F4 Thailand is that Tom is never shirtless. Like, even when he's in the pool, he has a shirt on. So I think they're actually kind of deliberately tamping down on that aspect of Gorya's interest in Tom. It will happen, but it will happen later at maybe a time that's more appropriate for them as characters. On the other hand, we know that Corinne hangs out in hostess bars and flirts with much older women. So I think the rest of them are all doing things that Tom has never done. I think he's the innocent of the F4. Like, don't they tease him that was his first kiss, the accidental kiss with Gorya?
Oh, yeah.
So I think he is quite innocent, relatively speaking, whereas the rest of the F4 are a bit more out there. And I think that's deliberate on the part of the writers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they have go in, fully dressed, getting out of bed with two women. I'm like, what were you doing fully dressed in bed with two women? What is that about in the first episode? Especially because in Together, he's ripping his shirt off every other scene. So I'm like, what is up with that? Like that was strange.
I will say, in general, the Thai dramas seem to be a little bit looser and not as suffocating about sexual matters as some Korean dramas can be. But I think RK is a good point that they're tamping it down somewhat. I hadn't really thought about it, but I do remember John D and the whole. I mean, we didn't have the beach, scene. We didn't have the whole trip to, the tropical island where she, sees him shirtless. So you're right. I hadn't even really focused in on how they were tamping that down. But I do think the two actors are so strong and they just spark. I mean, just even if they're doing just a photo shoot together, there's just this spark between the two of them. And so I hadn't even really picked up on that because I'm just so focused on how much sexual tension there is.
Yeah, I agree, Mel. I was going to say, they're both, just them looking at each other's eyes, I'm like, I see sparks. They're really cute.
Let's talk about the storeroom scene, because that's like one of my favorite scenes. I'm sorry, I know it was semi-hysterical in the camera just now. But you know the scene I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So for the people who don't know what I'm talking about, there's a scene where Goya's being beaten up because Hana has posed as Tom and said, yes, we're reinstating the red card. And then Tom comes running in and rescues her and picks her up and carries her away. It's this huge moment. And Bright is really strong, so he's able to securely hold her against his chest. Yeah, and Hema pointed out, look at her directly in the eye, and it was super intense.
Sexy.
Oh my God.
I was feeling it. That's when I was like, you know what? I see it. Like, yes.
It was so sexy. And then they're in it. He takes her home and he can't bring her into his bedroom. Metaphorically, they're not ready to be in the bedroom yet. So they're in the storage room, but it's beautifully lit. They have all these little dark with blue lights, and then they set the star lights going. Oh my God, I almost died. They have like these star lights moving around the room. Meteor Garden. They had a Meteor Garden on the ceiling. And then there's this whole conversation about how come he's fallen so in love with her so hard. And he grabs her face because she wants to bandage his wounds. And he's like, no, I'm going to bandage your wounds. And when he grabs her face, oh my God, I was just like completely laid out by that. And then when she falls asleep and he wants her, he picks her up to put her in his lap and his hands are shaking as he puts her. Oh, that scene was crazy. So there's tons of sexual tension in that scene.
Yeah.
Nothing actually happens. They don't kiss. Tom thinks
imagine what they do. Oh my gosh.
I can't wait.
It's gonna blow up. It's gonna be crazy.
Oh, the internet meltdown? Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Because people forget it, because people are freaking out because stills leaked of him kissing Lita. And it's in every version.
It's in every version.
It's in every version. So that's nothing new, but people had, oh my God, people are freaking out. And by the way, guys, you're saying that people watching this have seen other versions. Actually, there's a huge number of young women who've never seen any other version, and they're obsessed with it. So I don't think you have to know anything about the franchise to be into it.
Boys Over Flowers, I'm telling you, there's just crack in that particular plot. I don't know what it is, but
and they are losing it. And it's like we all knew what was coming. We didn't talk about the actress playing the fiancée Lita. Her name is Milk, and at least Alisa and I have seen her in a Boy Loves Thai series called Bad Buddy. And she has a lesbian plot line in that. And so we were all just like crossing our fingers, and they kind of teased us with that a little bit because the way she fell on Gloria at the party. Now, they haven't really played that up again. It still seems to be just kind of this friendship. But Elise and I were like, we're still hoping. We're still holding on.
Please hope. We'll see how it goes. But no, I mean, I think they're going to play it relatively straight. It's actually really touching because I'm trying to think of what order to talk about the specific episodes in, but I guess we can get into the last episode, episode 9. Episode 9 is freaking incredible, by the way, in my opinion. I can't stop thinking about it. The storytelling is just stupendous in that episode. So what happens in that episode is a billionaire dies of COVID. COVID exists in this universe. I was actually really surprised by that. It's like a passing reference, and RK is the one who spotted it on the iPad, I guess, or phone that somebody was looking at, and it says COVID-19 on it. So the billionaire dies, and it opens up this enormous power vacuum that suddenly everybody's lives become upended. And they have a sequence where all of the F4 and Lita find out about it, and Tom finds out about it, and he tells Gorya, something really big has happened, something really complicated. You're not going to see me for a while. I need to do something. It's too complicated for me for you to understand it. I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to go off and do it. And he's engaged, and there's a funeral for the billionaire that's sponsored by his family. And that sequence is just incredible because, first of all, you see the F4 with their families for the first time in a situation of power. And it's almost like there's other people who talk about the mythological aspects of the story, and I think it's an appropriate way to approach the scene because, like, it's almost like they go up to Mount Olympus and the mortals see the gods' real faces for the first time. And it's almost like Gorya and Cunning can see what the F4 really are for the first time in their power and what they actually represent in that moment. And a series of events unfold, but one of the things that unfolds is that Tom is telling Lita, love means everything to me, and I'm not going to give up on love. And, are you sure you want to do this engagement? Because we don't love each other, and it's important. We should love you should love the person you're going to marry. And he's so kind in that moment, in the way he's dealing with people. He's being super responsible. He's helping her out with she gets a bleeding on the back of her heel because she's, wearing high heels, and he sits her down and takes care of her. And the only reason he's capable of doing any of that is because Gorya got him there. Basically, his love for Gorya and the way he's been interacting with her makes him capable of that kind of empathy for Lita, and Lita falls in love with him in that moment because Gorya got him to the point where he could be lovable for Lita.
And she sees him being kind, and she also had seen him interact with Gorya's brother and be kind to Gorya's brother. There was a scene of them all kind of having the pillow fight together. But the key thing about the Band-Aid, again, it has stars on it, meteor stars on it. And it's one that Gorya gave to him that he had been holding close to his heart in his jacket pocket. So there was, again, just the level of detail that we all parsed out after, watching this episode. And I didn't catch all of those things, but everybody else on the internet did. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just so many layers to that. But the funeral, it was just interesting because we see the F4 with their families. We see why MJ was really scared about that iPad being thrown in the pool, because we see how scary his dad is, the mafia boss. But then notably, Bright is with Lita's family, and he is alone representing his family. So his mother is not there. It's Bright Tom stepping up as head of the family, representing the family, and you can see just change in hairstyle, change of attitude to his, people giving him information on an iPad about who's going to be at the funeral, just a whole growing up arc that happens in episode 9. It's really incredible, all the different ways that they show us that he is growing up. And then in the breakup scene at the end, when Gorya is so, she's just exhausted from it all. And he's like, haven't you seen how hard I'm trying? And it's like, he just, her betrayal of calling his family to let him know where he is so that the goons could come pick him up. Like, it was just the ultimate betrayal. Like, I was tearing up. Let's just admit it. But anyway, it's just another example of how much is in each episode. They're not dragging things out. They're not, I just remember so many episodes of the Korean version where they felt so padded and so just full of nonsense, and everything is so much more concentrated and then more impactful.
There's also the symbolism in there because, like, Goin says the game of how this country is run is about to change. And when he says it, it's a long shot of the room with the red carpet in the middle. And it's a visual callback to the red card game at the beginning. And they keep bringing up the red card game over and over again. Like at Tom's birthday party, that his mother has for him, the invitations are red cards. So it's just kind of like all that incredible level of detail to all the aspects of the storytelling and these callbacks and the complexity of like, and what they're saying. I think the social critique aspect of this is so much more foregrounded in this version of it than it has been in any other version. And you kind of had to do that because like we're in the world where we've had the 1% references to Occupy Wall Street. That's where 1% came from. And, you know, we've had this critique, a reckoning about toxic capitalism. We see that in Korean content, comes up over and over. In Squid Game, it comes up over and over again. And so F4 Thailand had to grapple with it. You can't have a story about four rich guys beating the crap out of people without somehow addressing the social stratification aspect of it. So,
and I think class struggle is a big part of the entire franchise, but it's really highlighted here because it's not just, oh, poor girl, rich boy. There's so much more going on there. At the school they go to, there's all levels of income levels, right? There's extremely wealthy people like the F4 themselves. There are people like Goria who had to, and Tale who had to, pass an exam to get to the school, and a whole range of people in the middle. And all of these people are involved in sort of the same struggle to be part of the power structure. Like, why does Goria want to go to this school? Because it's a way for her to better herself. So everyone is sort of aiming to be in that 1%, and yet the 1% itself is sort of this closed, exclusive club that you can't just get into. And this is, I think, a huge topical issue for people in Thailand itself, all across the world, yes, but I think specifically in Thailand because the income divide, the income gap is so great in that country, and you have a very small middle class, a very large working class, and then you're 1%. So I think all of this in context, they're doing a much better job of capturing that in this version than they did in the Korean version, even though poor girl, rich boy is a standard trope in K-drama.
Yeah. Also, the Thai king in real life is a horrible person. I don't know if you know anything about the Thai king in real life. He wears belly shirts with tattoos, and he's got a poodle named Fufu that he throws birthday parties. It's like out of a drama, only it exists in real life. That's the Thai king. It's really crazy. So people are Vickey's gonna Google that anyway.
Well, there is some interesting notes that we've seen on Twitter about some criticisms of the Thai government, which I did not realize was a military coup, I guess about 8 years ago or so. And so when Gory is having a conversation with her parents, they use a glitch in cell phone, like a cell phone breaking up. For the father says something critical about the Thai government, but they can kind of get it past the censors or whatever because the word, I think he was going to say sucks, the government sucks or something like that, and then it's glitched out, but you know what he said, and I think there's been a couple of instances of that, and so it was just fascinating to learn about that. That the writers are sneaking in little digs about the Thai government as well.
Yeah. So Vickey's horrified because she's looking at a picture of the Thai king. It's really bad. I would recommend you Google it and get a new perspective on the whole the whole story. Anyway, I wanted to transition because we've just spent time talking about episode 9, but episode 7 is the one that got a lot of attention. And so briefly, what happens is at the end of episode 6, Tom sees Ren and Goya embracing, and he misunderstands why they're embracing. He assumes it's a romantic embrace. He loses his shit and goes on a violent rampage, beats somebody unconscious, and then Goya shoves him into a classroom to talk to him about what he's doing, and he destroys the classroom and raises his fist to her. He doesn't hit her, but it's really scary, like really scary. And I watched that episode. I know all the versions. I knew he was going to have a meltdown, and I was still so horrified by that scene. I was sitting on the couch literally shaking, and my heart was pounding, and I just could not believe how intense and terrifying that scene was, especially because the way they did it was so brilliant. Like, it starts out, and I went back and rewatched it. In the zoo episode, they're on the bridge and you hear jungle noises in the background with certain kinds of birds and things that evoke the jungle. And the exact same sounds were playing when Tom was looking at Goya and Red embracing. He's wearing a tiger skin shirt. He's got the chain around his neck. And when he's rampaging, the sound design, it sounds like a horror movie noises. It's like you hear him breathing, but it's kind of metallic and it's been distorted, and it's supposed to be like really terrifying. And and when he's screaming at her and breaking that room up, it's like, holy shit, that was my reaction. I just couldn't get over how intense it was. And Melanie, you also saw it with no warning.
Yeah, I was gasping out loud. It got so intense and so scary and so dark. And we knew, we both put out warnings to Catherine, who wasn't going to be able to see it right away, and to warn her, maybe because the way they split it up on YouTube, they split it up into 5 different videos. And so we said, just skip the first one. Don't even go there, and don't even watch it, because it could be really triggering. And I don't know, Catherine, if you want, you did end up watching it. And I think you just appreciated the warning about it. So maybe you can speak to how you reacted when you saw it.
Yeah, it was really a hard watch, even though I had been prepared for it. And I was really grateful to have been prepared for it. But the other side of it is, these things need to be addressed. This kind of violence exists. Alisa said that right up the top, that, partner violence is a thing. And I have a lot of faith in this team that they're not going to throw that out gratuitously without context and without some kind of unraveling or some kind of way of coming to term, allowing the audience to come to terms with that as well. I just want to actually pick up on when you mentioned how Tom is watching the two of them hug. There's also a tiny scene where you see their perspective, and it's almost as if they heard something and they look. And it's like those things, documentaries about wild animals where the camera goes and you don't see it, but there's the you're the prey, and the beast is hunting you. And it was like, oh my God, like that was almost as,
or like a horror movie where there's sort of like, did I catch something out of the corner of my eye? There's something there?
Yeah, it was so well done. But back to that scene. Yeah, I was grateful for the heads up, quite honestly. But again, I had a lot of faith in the team that I could watch it, and because this is what bothers me about Boys Over Flowers is there's violence and there's terrible things happen, but there's no sense that there's going to be a social commentary about this. There's no sense that it's going to be that the character himself is going to see it as inappropriate behavior, or that anyone is going to call him on that behavior, and that doesn't happen here.
Right. Hema and Vickey, how about you guys? How did you react? You had a warning because we have a group chat about Boys Over Flowers, and I raced in and was like, oh my God, guys, this is really heavy. Plus the social media blow up, which we'll get into in a minute. But how did you guys react to it?
I really appreciated the warning, because even though I knew what was coming, it was still a lot for me. To the extent where I didn't go back and watch it again like I do with some scenes, because I couldn't handle it. The bit where he kind of raises his fist was so scary for me that I think I actually held my breath for a couple of seconds, because I thought for sure, he's not going to hit her, but he's going to put it through a wall or something, and none of that happened. And I thought that was actually really clever for them to kind of draw the line there. It was a lot for me, but I also think, like Catherine alluded to, that this is a thing that needs to happen in the context of the story. But the context is important too. Like, there is built into the narrative a condemnation of violence. It's not just, hey, look how hot this angry guy is. This is a terrible thing that a guy who is dangerous is doing to the female lead. Like, this is bad. It is not okay. We should not condemn it. And I really appreciated that the rest of the episode kind of is the reaction of the rest of the characters to what Tom has done. And Tom himself is off on the sidelines and we don't see him very much. So I thought that was also another really good addition to the story and some very important context for what he had done at the beginning of the episode. So for me, it worked, but only in totality. Like if I saw just those scenes in isolation, I would be really disturbed and would probably hate this just as much as I hated Boys Over Flowers. So
I mean,
somebody
on Twitter
wait,
hold on. Somebody on Twitter made the point that Tom sort of caged himself for the rest of the episode, that he locked himself in his room because he felt himself out of control and he didn't want to be out of control. And so he locked himself away.
Self-loathing thing, right? Like he has a very strong streak of self-loathing. And I think this goes with that.
How about you, Vickey? Wait, I want to hear from Vickey.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like Catherine, just like RK, the warning was really lovely because even watching it with the warning, it was like, whoa, it escalated really, really quickly. And at first watching it, I couldn't grasp why he was so angry. It kind of felt like it was an overreaction in a way. When I first like looked at it from just that standpoint, I was like, why is he so pissed off to the point of almost killing this person? You know, this innocent guy who was just beaten. It just was like, I'm not gonna lie, in that moment, it did turn me off a little bit. But like RK mentioned, as we got to see that his actions were condemned and he himself realized, holy crap, he's gone way too far. That's when I was like, okay, I see where they went with this. I see where it seemed like they almost were like, this is how far he can go. You know, it was almost like, this is the epitome of his character in a way. It was like, this is the first time we've seen him blow up so much that he just could not handle it. And that's really interesting to see as well, because I also want to see how it now, so far, it seems like that he's kind of almost not the same, like he's kind of grown from it in a way. Like we haven't seen him regress as he did in that particular episode, that scene. But I do wonder what they're gonna do in the next future episode, because I don't know if he's completely healed. I don't like that notion that all of a sudden he's like seen the light. I think that there's still that anger inside of him, and it stems deeper, as we see from many of childhood factors, his relationship with his mom. There's so many things that he has to address, and I really do hope as the show goes on, he will find that within himself, because that was a lot. I don't know. To me, I can't just think of it as that moment. No, he blew up. Like that was very concerning. And I think watching this, I was just like, okay, Tom, like seek.
Yeah, I mean,
help.
he threw a chair behind Gloria's head. That was the first thing that just had my jaw on the floor.
I want him to go to therapy. I really do.
Right, I know, exactly. And then, and like you said, there's so many things, but I do feel like rather than being healed by love, this show is kind of showing her as a catalyst for him seeing himself and seeing how bad he is.
Yeah.
And it's like seeing how frightened she was in that moment that made him stop. And she was, when he was beating up that kid and kicking him on the floor, the other members of F4 tried to pull him away, tried to stop him, and they could not stop him. But Gloria had the ability to to pull him away from that situation. She was trying to calm him down, but the problem was she started mentioning Ren. Yeah. And I noticed like that was when he started the heavy breathing. When she started mentioning Ren, that revved him up again. And that's when he exploded, just feeling, and it was the self-loathing, as you said, that he didn't, the final line that he says, "You never would have chosen me anyway." Mm-hmm. It's just like, he feels like it's so hopeless that he's not worthy of her. And so he just explodes. But I mean, the fact that he held up the fist to her, I couldn't believe they went that far. And, I'm glad they're showing his journey. Like you say, this is a kid that could use some therapy. He's not going to get it. But
honestly, I don't think the show's not done with it yet. I know it's not, because if you know what's coming in next, some of us do know what's coming next. he's definitely going to get a comeuppance. There's going to be a reckoning for that behavior coming.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I like that. First of all, and Vicky, I'm actually with you. Like you, yeah, we need to see more, and we are. I think. I mean, I trust that we're going to see more. But I think also, though, that this show did something that other shows haven't done, which is that he explicitly repudiates violence at the end of the episode. That doesn't mean it's over. He's still got to deal with his crap. But at least there was a statement. Like he says to Gorya, I don't blame you for lying to me. I was a horrible person. And nobody's getting a red card anymore. And they never do that in the previous versions. He never says no more red cards. He never says, I'm not going to be violent anymore. I don't want to be that person anymore. He doesn't make any commitment to being a better person.
Well, also to point that out, in the previous versions, I don't really know the Junpyo version, sorry, but I don't think that all the violence, they never had Junpyo ever exert that type of violence that time did. So there was never any blame on Junpyo in some ways for him to even consider, apologizing or feeling bad for all the things he's done. Because I don't think he directly went as crazy in terms of what Time did in episode,
Let me tell you what happened in all the versions, because I only know that really interesting. Yeah. Well, but what he did was pretty bad. He like grabs her and tries to force kiss her, and he gets like in her face screaming at her over Jihu. It's pretty bad. I was like, wow. And he never apologizes for it. He never expresses any regret for it. It doesn't no acknowledgement that what he did was wrong. In Meteor Garden 2001, he tries to sexually assault her. He grabs her in a stairwell, throws her against the wall, punches the wall, and then rips her shirt. Yep, that happened.
Oh my God.
Yes, and I don't think it exists in the film version of Hana Yori Dango. It does exist in the manga. So, it's interesting because F4 Thailand, you have this, and they had to make a decision about how they wanted to play the scene, whether they wanted to have it at all. But they made everything about this production has been super thoughtful. So they consciously chose to include it, right? And to put it at that intensity level on purpose. So why do you think they made that choice? And is it justified in the narrative?
One of the things we know about violence, and especially partner violence, is it escalates.
Right.
And that's exactly what happens in this drama. And I think that's the choice they made. And as difficult as it was for me to watch, it happens. It's true. And let us deal with this. And previous versions, you have that escalation, but it goes nowhere. So I keep coming down to saying I have a lot of faith in this production, that they're going to give us meaning behind this, and they're going to be justified in the choices that they're making. As hard as it was to watch, I think they had to go there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Catherine. I think, this story has not shied away from the core darkness of the romance. Like I said earlier, literally every single time they have a moment of emotional connection, it's in the dark and one of them is sick or bleeding. This is not a happy candy coated. I mean, Boys Over Flowers kind of wrap this up in this very Easter egg kind of colored, right, almost paradise and the crazy clothes, and it's sublimated how dark the story is. But at its heart, this story is very dark-sided because, again, it's really about women and the patriarchy. I mean, 1 in 4 women are going to be subjected to intimate partner violence, and that's just the ones who have it directed against them. How many people had to watch their mothers being beaten up by their fathers, right? So this is like a huge thing, and I think that this story is grappling with that reality in a lot of ways. And
so what was bad about the discussion of this episode and this particular scene is that people posted, what was great about the writing is that this scene was in context of the drama, and then was in context for the rest of the episode and how everyone reacted to it and dealt with it. And it was impactful, but but then it dealt with it.
And I'm sorry, Mel, just real quick, the fact that the uncle calls it out and says, that's Tom's problem. You didn't do anything wrong.
Right,
is
exactly.
really important in later
really
in the episode.
Important.
Anyway, so
really
continue.
important. Yeah, that was one of his best, one of the Flower Uncle's best lines of the entire show. So the problem is that people, everyone was reacting on Twitter to this scene, but some people posted the scene in isolation, just kind of saying, I'm never watching this, or why are people watching this drama? Look how violent this is. And then, some people were like, I don't want to watch that kind of thing. It's triggering. And then other people made fun of people for being sensitive to the violence shown in this episode. And it's like, everyone, again, we went out of our way to warn people who hadn't seen it that this is a heavy episode. This is really hard to watch. Brace yourselves. Or if you have an issue with watching domestic violence, just skip the first 10 minutes and watch the rest of the episode. You don't need to see it if it's difficult for you. But not everybody had that attitude. And some people kind of made fun of people for being sensitive or triggered by watching it. And how can you judge someone else who might have lived through domestic violence in their own life for having a hard time watching something so intense? I haven't lived through stuff like that, and it was so intense for me. I can't even imagine someone who might have lived through some of that in their own real life, how triggering and how upsetting it might have been to watch that scene.
So I want to talk about this a little bit because that was a rough week. That was a really
rough week.
Because I was tweeting a lot about it. And I had been tweeting a lot, even before this episode, I did a long Twitter thread on why do women engage with problematic narratives and what's the value and benefit of it for women? Like, why are they interested in problematic stories? And so that week when that came out, I was like, hey, I'm re-upping this thread because I just want to talk about this and, why it was narratively justified to have that scene in the story. And as an FYI, I loved the episode. I thought it was really amazing storytelling. It was hugely impactful. It worked for me as a story, but it was like when I was on Twitter, on the one hand, there were people treating me like I had personally murdered feminism with a penknife, right? And Vicky, you unfortunately got tagged into that whole crap on Twitter. What was your take on that whole conversation? That was rough.
It was rough. Because it was like, you were clearly trying to reason and, you understood both sides. And I thought that that's just kind of how arguments, like you understand that, what happened was so and so and so and so, but it just felt like it was coming from one-sided and they didn't want to hear anything else. And it was just, it was like, let's have a convo, like listen, So it was definitely interesting.
It was... Yeah, because it came in hot. This happened several times. People came in hot into the mentions, and I was trying to engage people respectfully because I was like, you could be a domestic violence victim. I don't know. I'm trying to talk to you with respect, regardless. And they did not pay me the same respect.
No, absolutely not.
That was a rough morning, but hold on. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, like you said, Mel, I saw people who ostensibly were on my side or agreed with me, who behaved so poorly that I was extremely angry. I'm still angry about it. I'm very upset about it. It was crap. It was crappy behavior because do not attack the people who are upset by the domestic violence scene. Like, what is this nonsense? And I think another thing that upset me was a refusal to grapple with the fact that this is a dangerous story. This is a dangerous story intranarratively. Goya is constantly in danger in the story. And it's a dangerous story in the world. Like, there is harm that can come from this story. That doesn't mean the story shouldn't be told. Doesn't mean it doesn't have value. But recognize what you're reckoning with. Don't trivialize the danger of the story, right? Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
Well, and I think the other side of this too is, these are young people and they don't.
Some of them are, not everybody, but anyway,
theoretically they're late teens. And they're grappling with these issues already. And how do you give people with less world experience and knowledge the tools they need to confront this kind of stuff? One of the ways you can do that is narratively, to show it, to show the potential for violence, to show how frightening it can be, to show the ramifications of it, and to show the consequences of it, hopefully. We don't want all of our media to be lessons and preachy, but I don't think this drama is doing that. But I think it is looking at an issue and saying, this stuff exists, this stuff happens, this stuff can happen to very young women. And like, let's talk about this. And then that gives us as an audience an opportunity to talk these things through. And we don't want to be disrespectful of people who are triggered by that, and for whom that's a very difficult thing to watch. I mean, if somebody said to me, I don't think I can watch any more of this because this was so heartbreaking and just, it hurt to watch this, I would be like, yeah, like maybe you need to take a step back. But the fact that there were people, quite honestly, mocking people who had a hard reaction to it was almost harder than watching the episode itself. And, taking any of that out of context makes it brutal. It's already brutal, but the context at least gives you something to grab onto and discuss and think about afterwards. So that week I found very troubling.
There was one conversation I'm proud of, though. I want to call it out because another woman who came in very upset into the mentions, and I spoke to her and I said, I'm not trying to change your mind. I just want you to understand why I have this opinion of the episode and where I'm coming from on it. And we went back and forth. And then afterwards, she said, I still don't agree with you, but I understand where you're coming from now. And she follows the account now. She follows our Twitter account. And I felt really good about that because nobody's mind was changed, but it was like we were able to engage respectfully on it. And I was really happy about that. I wish there had been more of that week. Instead, it was a lot of attacking on both sides. It really, really sucked. And I was very upset all week. I was actually having trouble focusing on other things because just the reactions were so intense and emotional. And Hema, I see you, RK, I see you nodding your head. Go ahead. What were you saying?
So I'm just going to summarize what we're all talking about. And I think there's two things here. One is that stories have power, right? And the other thing is because they have power, you have to tell them responsibly. So while it's true that the average viewer knows the difference between fact and fiction, it's also true that people receive information that reflects their own experiences. And if they've grown up around violence or there's potential for violence in their lives, this could be really triggering. And I think that's why the writers taking such a careful and sort of self-aware approach to the violence was really important, because they're saying, hey, this isn't okay. And we want you via Goria to be empowered to say, no, this is not okay. I don't want this in my life. I know it exists, but I have tools that I can use to fight back. And I think that's where this is so much better than Boys Over Flower, because I really felt the Korean version downplayed that and did not give its female lead the agency to fight back against any of the violence that she was subjected to.
I agree. And what I really appreciated, and I appreciated this from the teaser trailer, that I felt like the makers of the story are very clear-minded about how dark it is and how troubling some of it is. And they are unsentimental about it. And they're not trying to candy coat it for you. They're forcing you to grapple with it. And so I respect it. I think it's just really well done. And I'm impressed. I thought for sure, first of all, we were going to lose people in our group who would bail on the story, and nobody has. Everybody is still watching, which is pretty remarkable. And other people I follow on Twitter who I would describe as feminist and aware, like the Accidental Kiss podcast folks who are coming at it from a feminist lens, they also are still on board with it. and a lot of other people. So like, I literally don't know a single person who was watching the story and just said, screw this, and jetted out after this. So I think that really speaks to the level of storytelling in that episode. Because like you said, Catherine, you see the consequences of Tom's behavior play out through the whole episode. And everybody is kind of grappling with their reactions to what happened and how they're going to deal with it and what it means to the friendships. They have a huge crack up of the F4. They almost like bust up as friends. You know, Goya is struggling with her feelings. And I do think it is extremely interesting, though, that they have this dream date, as Vickey described it, with Ren, where she has a viable alternative. She has somebody that she could be with who would be perfectly acceptable, who's caring for her, and, you know, very different. But I think of Goya as a character as somebody who is so forceful. She's so strong that she needs to have somebody that she can kind of wail on, both emotionally and physically, where who's not going to waver. You know, like Tom, whatever his faults, whatever Goya throws at him, he takes it and he still loves her, you know, and not only still loves her, but loves her because of it, like loves her because she's so forceful. He's looking at her and going, she's spectacular, look at her, right? Because she is just a force of nature, and that's what he loves about her. And she needs someone like that. She needs somebody who can just take it all in and not waver. And so I think narratively it makes a lot of sense in the context of the story, even though it's really dark. It's a dark message. I don't think they're shying away from that, though. You know, they know the story they're telling.
To me, it's also interesting when she has that moment of self-realization, and Ren is standing right there watching her confront Tesla, Knig's ex-boyfriend. Yeah. And she's being violent to Tesla, okay? Like, she kicks him to the floor. And that's when she talks about, you know, she overhears how he had been speaking about her at the zoo, and realizes, and she says, my boyfriend, you know, so she says that in referring to Tom. And that's where you see Ren's reaction shot of raising his eyebrows like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, okay. But, you know, Gory tries to, I love how she tries to downplay it later. No, I said boy band. Like,
yeah.
But in that moment, she's being violent. She's being assertive. And so you see, this is part of her character too, as you said. She needs somebody strong who she can battle with, you know, and still, you know, kiss and make up at the end of the day, I guess. But I just thought it was so interesting how the writers, you know, that confrontation with the ex-boyfriend happens in every version probably, but all the things that they did with it, you know, all the added meaning that they did in that scene was fascinating. And what we learned about Goria, and even her just kind of you know, like her inner consciousness feelings about Tom that maybe she hadn't ever really, you know, vocalized or realized before, but in that heat of the moment, she does. So,
well, I mean, I was really taken that when she texts him, she's about to text him before she gets the call from Tia that they're at the stadium. And the honey badger is in the background when she's texting him. And, you know, it just tells you her perspective. I mean, she's aligned with the honey badger and she's choosing the honey badger. And I think there's been points in the narrative where Goya has to have clear sight about the choice she's making.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like the sense of choice that they've given Goya in this version. So you just touched on that too.
Yeah. Like she's, and she has to make a clear-sighted choice. Like she has, so there's these inflection points in the story. And this is one of them where she sees him for what he is, and she still makes the choice to be with him. Now we've had another point where she sees him for what he is again in a different light with his role in the 1% universe. That at that point she opts out. Like, we know that's not going to stay that way, but at that point she's like, I can't handle that. That's beyond me. She can handle fighting. She can handle battling somebody, but she cannot, like, the whole thing of like how to navigate the 1% world is beyond her. So that's actually really interesting, the contrast there, you know, of these crisis points in the relationship. But we know what's coming. Do we want to like spoil it a little bit about what's coming? For those of you who don't know. So there's a scene in every version where the female lead gets kidnapped by former victims of the male lead. And they use her to lure him somewhere. And then they say, we're going to beat the shit out of you and you can't retaliate, because if you retaliate, we're going to hurt her. And then he takes a beating. And it's all very dramatic. And then they're about to hit him with a chair or something. And the female lead throws her body on him and takes the blow from the chair. So how do we, I don't know how they're going to do it in this version. They have taken like these plot points that are present in every version and then there's something wildly different with them. So I'm just dying to see, because I feel like that's got to be playing out as a comeuppance to Tom about all the crap he did earlier. Especially because I think Tale is the brother of the guy in the first scene. So its consequences coming back to him, you know, so it'll be really interesting to see how they play it. And
I don't think there's a lot, like they've already, you know, done the reversal where Tom is the one drugged and you know, photos taken or, you know, whatever.
Oh
in
yeah.
This version. But I don't think there's a lot they can do to twist that. Wouldn't it be nice to be surprised though? I mean,
they surprised us all the time. Like what's crazy is like, you know, the plot, at least I do. And I'm like, every episode, I'm like, what are they going to do now? Like, what's going to happen? You know, as if you'd never seen it before, because they do so many interesting changes. I actually end up surprised when they hit a plot point that is like directly in every version. And I go, oh yeah, it's this story still. Right. Like that's how surprising they've been with this narrative. Yeah, I agree. Now I want to watch them do something surprising with that scene. Oh, and I mean, yes. And I just also wanted to point out that the funeral scene is wholly new to this. They've never done that in any other version. They added that to that, which is very interesting. And it's 20 minutes long. And these episodes are short, right? They're less than an hour long. So to take up a third of the episode with that one scene is very interesting. And it's something that they created from scratch.
Right. I mean, it showed so many different things. I think in the Korean version, there was sort of like a charity auction or something that showed extreme wealth. I mean, there was different ways that showed extreme wealth, but it was, you know, a way to show us that gulf. And even, you know, the names of each chapter are impactful. In this one, the incident of the 1%, you know, and it just how this one person's death, who had been, the wealthiest person, and how it reverberated, and how in Gloria's world, her mother, all she knows is that she can't pick the number 83 as a lottery number because that was the dead guy's age at you know, and so, you know, but they don't understand, like there's constantly through the episode talk about stock market crashes and the price of gold and all of these different economic impacts from this uncertainty in the world of the 1% by this very powerful person dying. And now the funeral was this power play of everyone jockeying for their new position in this new landscape. And so it was fascinating to see the director be able to still stay completely true to the spirit of the original story, but yet give us something new and give us added depth. And I'm looking forward, you know, we're just a little bit over halfway. And like I said, I literally count the hours almost each episode because I just want to see what this director and what these writers are going to do with this story. They hit the beats, but they do them in a new and creative way. And then they add material like this funeral scene, which is so impactful and so powerful. And I just wanted to add too, I mean, you guys know my opinion about live watching in that I rarely do it. Rarely. And I am up Saturday morning as well, trying to squeeze this in before I get on with my day. So this is how interesting this version has been. You got to know, people, that Catherine is legendary for not watching something until it's almost over. Like she never wants to live watch. And so that's really saying something about how impactful it is. And I'm really enjoying it being this group experience, not only just with our group on this podcast, but with everyone on Twitter. You know, in a way, it's good that they only give us one episode a week, because there's so much to unpack just from one episode each week. And really, I like to kind of sit with it and think about it each week before, and rather than binge watching, you know, something like this. It's kind of better to just sit with one episode each week and really take it in.
Well, you know, because I'm crazy, I watched the whole thing from beginning to end before the podcast. I needed an excuse. And I can tell you that it was really intense. And I was like, whoa, this is actually not a show you want to binge. I felt so flooded with emotion after binging it. It's just, there's too much in there to grapple with emotionally and thematically, and the storytelling beats and all that. It's just really, it's a lot. So I'm loving the weekly watch, and I do rewatch things. Like if I'm really into something, everybody knows this about me, I'll rewatch an episode 3-4 times, like as it's happening. When I watched My Mister, I literally would watch the whole episode, rewind it, turn the subtitles off, and watch it without subtitles so that I could pay attention to the visuals, because the visuals are so good. I'm doing the same thing with F4 Thailand, because I did a thread about My Mister that went viral, where I talk about all the visual storytelling beats in it. And I could easily, without breaking a sweat, do a similar thread for F4 Thailand without thinking twice about it. And it's remarkable because, like, this is not a prestige drama, right? I mean, I just want to call out the director, because he could have half-assed this. He could have said, hey, it's a teen franchise. I don't care. It's whatever. And everybody will watch it anyway because it's Boys Over Flowers, which is pretty much what happened with the 2018 Chinese version, which is horrible. And yet, no, he said, no, I'm going to pay this due care, respect, and attention. I'm going to treat this, respect the audience, because the audience is primarily women, primarily young women. And yet, I'm going to trust they catch the honey badger metaphor. I'm going to trust they understand the costuming choices. I'm going to trust that they're going to pick up on the sound design. You know, like, it's just, I find that very moving. And I really, really appreciate it that that's the approach they took to this adaptation. It's truly incredible. And I'm a crazy fangirl, right? So take it with that context. But I'm really blown away by it.
Yeah.
I just think
and that's saying something, because Alisa is okay. She's known as the drop queen. Okay, like she's legendary in our group chat. We're always getting her to try new dramas that we love and that we binge. It's like, yeah, I gave it half an episode. I was done. You know. Now we know that the Boys Over Flower narrative speaks to her, and so we knew she was going to watch this anyway. But for her to have this level of appreciation, like, she is a harsh critic. And so, I mean, you can hear me gushing and saying that it's great. Maybe you discount that, but let me just tell you, Alisa's standards are very high.
I know. So, well, it's really funny that my personal brand is My Mister and Boys Over Flowers, which is kind of crazy, but it's true. But no, this version, I really am, I was very emotional about it. I mean, for a lot of reasons. I mean, you guys know, like, a lot of my personal story aligns with the things that happen in this. So on that level, I'm emotional about it, because it feels very much like a mirror for my life in some ways. And then, you know, the director taking so much care and attention and, you know, and respect, and actually wanting to do this well and right. And then also just on a storytelling accomplishment, it is very, very hard to pull something like this off, you know,
especially if it's something that's a beloved franchise that people have high expectations about.
Yeah.
And to take it and actually add depth and meaning to a familiar story is that is an accomplishment in and of itself. And, you know, I really appreciate the way also that the director is engaging with the fans. You know, he's giving us some ideas of some of the behind the scenes favorite scenes of his, and some of those are the exact same ones that are the favorites of the audience. Like when we've extensively talked about a couple of them, the one where they're in the sort of storage closet, you know, with the stars being projected on the ceiling and everything, and also the birthday scene where, you know, Tom opens his eyes after the countdown to midnight, and the first thing he wants to see on his birthday is Gloria's face, and she's just smiling radiantly at him. And the director has said, you know, that's his favorite too. And I love that he's giving us that insight in real time, you know, as each episode airs, and he's giving us some of these little nuggets, and also just discussion of the preparation that went into it, the workshopping that they did. I mean, the care that they put into the casting, because that's one of the most key things about a drama like this, is having that chemistry between the actors, not just of the romantic couple, but there had to be chemistry of F4, the four guys themselves. And, you know, pairing, I mean, Bright is one of the, you know, top stars in Thai dramas as after the success of Together, but he's had other shows before that, but that show in 2020 made him superstar among, and I mean, known internationally as well. So you bring him in as the lead, but then taking a chance on Tu, the actress who was a influencer on Instagram, you know, had not acted before, but, you know, hearing that Bright was part of the casting and helping to, when they had it down to kind of a final handful of choices. And after I guess they like tried an argument scene or something, and that, you know, she gave as good as she got or whatever in the audition, and Brett was like, yeah, well, we don't need to look any further, this she's great, you know. So but they did a lot of workshopping and a lot of work with the young actors, and it's paying off. It's paying off in what we're seeing on screen. Like we mentioned, being a new actor, and I also was kind of like, but then he's really impressed me with a couple of scenes in particular where he really, you know, he came up to the mark, and he really, he's given it so much more than the Korean version. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, and I think for somebody like me too, who does not like most of this franchise, and who came to this with very low expectations, and quite frankly, I've been blown away. But they've also, you know, like Alisa, I appreciate good storytelling in the text, in the visuals, in the sound, and thoughtfulness around issues that need to be presented. Like I've been blown away by it, and I'm so surprised by that, pleasantly surprised by that.
I had such low expectations for this franchise generally that just even the first episode, I was like, wow, this is so much better than I expected. And then as I kept watching, it just kept improving. But one thing I want to add is I find everything the director and even the cast members say about their work on this so unpretentious. Like, this is a really glitzy production with, you know, a lot of really high production values and designer brands, and they know they have an international audience, and they could have such huge heads about this, but they really don't. They're kind of out there like saying all the right things and being so just normal and unpretentious about it, and not really trying to sort of, you know, give this very high level meta commentary about their work, but just saying, hey, this is what we like, and this is what we did. Like with workshopping the actors, I think they told them to put a little bit of their own personalities into the parts. And I thought that was so great, because you have Du, who does draw in real life, taking a lot of, you know, giving a lot of attention to his artwork. And you have, you know, Win and Nani doing things they do in real life and bringing that to the characters, but at the same time acknowledging that they're not their characters, right? Like, I find the whole production just so like kind of laid back and unpretentious, even though it's so careful and self-aware. So for me, that's a big deal, because I love K-drama, but I find that a lot of people who talk about K-drama, the cast and the crew, can be very pretentious about the things they say about their productions. So that was really refreshing.
I think the Thai industry in general is so much smaller than Korean industry that they have a really pragmatic attitude about it. Like all the cast are in college. I think Win may have a degree, but I know Bright is still enrolled technically in college, and Tu is a dental student, and Du is still in school. I don't know what he's studying. So yeah, and I think that they have the expectation that, yeah, we're doing this acting thing, but we're going to have to make a living at some point, and so they continue their education. It's just a different perspective, and they're much more accessible to the fans. And to be fair, their fans are a lot different in Thailand. Apparently, you can go out in public in Thailand with your family, and you don't get bothered. The celebrities, they have a hands-off attitude about the celebrities. So I think the whole ecosystem is much healthier over there than even in the US or any other place. So that's actually nice too, because then you can see them relax a little bit, and it's not so they're not so in the spotlight. But
yeah,
so
it's been amazing. They've showed two. We're following all of them on Instagram too, and seeing some of the background videos. And it's like when they were filming the party scene that we just saw in episode 9, like Tu was like, oh gosh, I've got an exam tomorrow. And Brett was like, you should go be studying, while we're waiting,
Yeah.
It's like you say, it's very endearing. And I find the down to earthness that RK talked about of the whole cast extremely refreshing. I'm enjoying following them on Instagram because they just seem, I don't know, just like you said, there's just this laid backness about it that I'm really appreciating, and just the looseness in general. Watching Thai dramas, I've been really enjoying them, and F4 is what started me watching them, but I'm not going to be stopping because I'm really enjoying. Not all of them are of this level of production, God knows.
None of them are.
None of them are, but they're still really enjoyable and fun, and just have a different vibe about them. I'm not going to stop watching Korean dramas. I'm just saying it's refreshing having a little bit of a change of pace.
So what are your final thoughts about the production? We'll just go by one. And since Catherine is first on my screen, I get to ask her first.
Well, I think I've pretty much said it. I was completely surprised, came in with low expectations, completely surprised. I'm blown away by the production. And I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait till Saturday so that we can watch the next episode and talk about it. And I'm really happy that my expectations were wrong.
How about you, RK?
So really simple, 2 thumbs up. I'm really enjoying it. And for all the serious and great stuff we've talked about, I also want to highlight the fact that there are aspects of this drama that are just dumb fun, and that is great. I love that kind of stuff. I find myself laughing through several scenes in all the episodes, and it's good to keep that amount of leavening in there so that it doesn't get too dark. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, the zoo date. Bright was so funny in the zoo date. Oh my God, that was actually epic. Anyway, he made 2 people break character in that episode. He made Du break character and the maid. Anyway, so Vicky, how about you? What are your last thoughts?
Same here. I kind of didn't know what to expect. I did not have low expectations because I kind of had a feeling that they were gonna. When my sister was the one who told me about this. I had a feeling that they were definitely gonna be. I just thought they all looked good, and I was like, okay, purses were open. I had a feeling that it was definitely gonna be a fun teen take on Boys with Flowers. I don't know, I just kind of knew it was gonna be something, but of course I didn't expect to like it. But I knew that it had the potential because it just looked so crisp when I saw the teasers. But as far as production, we've all watched shows that has bigger production, so I'm not super duper impressed or anything. As far as everything that ties in, of course, the storytelling is what's really, I feel like, has been great so far. And them tying everything together with the production, that's a plus. And just the flow of it. Honestly, for me, it's a nice little watch, and I'm not super deeply immersed, but I'm immersed to the point where I like it. I just think it's a fun story that I'm continuing watching, and I'm just here for it. And I'm just more surprised that it was the only version that I gave a chance, because I vowed not to watch another version of Boys with Flowers. So, like I said, it's done its job, and Alisa probably contributed to like 90% of that. But I
Sorry.
love it. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. It's great. It's a fun. I like it.
So
Mel,
I would
final
say
thoughts.
that my reaction is, I've already said that I literally count the hours. We're recording this on a Thursday, which makes me so happy. That means tomorrow is Friday, which means there's only one more full day until the next episode. And Alisa has, when she gloms onto something and she really enjoys it and she thinks it's so fantastic, then I know it's going to be something extraordinary. And so when she said, you have to watch this, I knew it was the same with my mister. That, she's like, just, I didn't have to power through the first 4 episodes like I did to that to get to where it got really, enjoyable and not just dark. But this series, she said, this is really something that you need to watch. And so I'm known as being very ADHD with my watching of dramas, that I just watch so many different things at once and just, it's like, squirrel, what's the next thing? But this, I'm so glad I got on this train and have been enjoying it week to week. And I'm enjoying so many other Thai dramas. I enjoyed watching Together so much. That was a very fun binge. For anyone who hasn't seen it, who's been watching F4, Win and Bright play college students, and this adorable boy love romance is just, no, it's not the level of F4, but it's just super compelling, and they have fun chemistry together, which made it even more delicious that they're playing 2 members of F4, because in Thailand, they're just known as from this boy love drama. And Bright is just really compelling. He can bring on the smolder. He can bring on the silly scenes, like RK mentioned. His sense of comedy is very fun in the lighter moments of the series when he moves into the house next to Goria, and he has all of those, seeing the cockroach and all of those different things. Oh my God, he was hilarious. So I'm really wondering what's going to be next for him. It's going to be interesting watching these actors. 2 is already going to be in, it looks like a dark drama, and one of the actors from the Bad Buddy series that we mentioned earlier. And I'm going to be interested to see, all of this international attention that some of these actors are going to have. What is this going to mean for the Thai industry? What are more people going to be watching dramas from Thailand? Are they going to get Netflix deals, as RK mentioned, or what's the next step for some of this? It's just going to be interesting to watch all of this play out, because I feel like this series is an inflection point, even though I'm brand new, whatever it is, just a couple of months into watching things from Thailand, but I'm not the only one, right? There's people all over the world that are turning their attention to Thailand and these series because they're watching it on YouTube or whatever, and getting commercials for some of the other productions or whatever, and taking a chance on them in the same way that I did. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
So my final thoughts on this, I just want to specifically give a shout out to the fandom, because the fandom for this is full of so many smart, thoughtful women who are doing a brilliant job of dissecting the narrative and taking it into context socially, politically, psychologically. It's really quite remarkable. And these conversations are happening on a lot of different, because I'm crazy. I'm on Discord, and I'm on My Drama List, and I'm also on Twitter talking about this. And like, just the people I'm meeting through this it's been so incredibly gratifying just to get their perspective, and watching. If you are somebody who doesn't like to watch week by week, I would say, like Catherine, you should try to make an exception for this, because the conversations are so much a part of the viewing experience. And I just love it. I just absolutely love being part of the fandom. I mean, even with the blow up after episode 7 and how dark it got that week, I thought it was really valuable to experience it, as painful and difficult as it was. So yeah, I just think it's just, wow, it's just special. It's special.
Yeah,
and you guys should be part of it.
We're doing when Alisa said, let's record this while it's still happening, I said, that makes me laugh now, because I was like, is there going to be enough to talk about? Or will be in the middle of here we are after having talked all this time, and the drama is only a little over half finished. So that just shows you how much there is to the show. And so I can't believe if you've listened all this far and you might not have watched it, but if you haven't, go check it out, because you're going to be rewarded with a really fun experience.
Yeah. And then hop on Twitter and talk to us about it, because it's fun. So that is it for our episode. I have been really looking forward to this. So thank you, ladies. This was so cool. I appreciate all of you. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how the rest of the series unfolds. So, and that's it.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.